representing Canada's financial capital, the fourth largest city in North America, and the most amazing city in the world. This is Toronto Business Journal.
In this edition of the Toronto Business Journal, we speak with Dan Berthiaume, Senior Editor of Technology for Chain Storage, about how Canada's oldest company plans to challenge Amazon. We then talk to Jeffrey Dworkin, former CBC Radio and NPR Washington head of news, about how the proposed bill C-10 could, in fact, infringe upon free speech. And finally, we chat with Rob Sysak, executive director of the coolest neighborhood in the Western Hemisphere, about the growing alienation of small business owners in the face of seemingly bizarre public health measures in the province of Ontario. And now, welcome to the Toronto Business Journal. Hello, Dr. Sam Dubé here once again for the Toronto Business Journal, and I'm joined by Dan Berthiaume. Dan, we'd pronounce your name Berthiaume in Canada, but it's Berthiaume. Thanks for joining us today, Dan.
Thank you, Sam.
So Dan is the senior editor of technology for Chain Storage Age, a leading retail trade publication here in North America. Dan, you recently wrote an article there entitled Hudson's Bay Creates Canadian Challenge to Amazon, Walmart, and eBay. Can you explain to us what's going on?
Yes, Hudson's Bay is coming out with their own online marketplace called The Bay. And the online marketplace model is basically a larger retailer like a Hudson's Bay or an Amazon or a Walmart will offer an e-commerce platform where typically small businesses, small brands, small retailers can independently market and sell their products. But the product isn't actually offered on the main Hudson's Bay site. It's offered on their marketplace site, where Hudson's Bay is providing the front-end mechanism for the small business that typically might have their own very small website or maybe their own mom and pop shop or some type of small local distribution. Now they can potentially reach all of Hudson Bay's customer base, but they are still managing their own inventory, their own fulfillment. They're using Hudson Bay tools to conduct the actual e-commerce transactions and to create the listings and the product images and to update, their listings and update their marketing. But for a company like Hudson's Bay, and this is something, for example, that Amazon and Walmart and eBay have really had a lot of success with, they can very quickly take their inventory and make it much broader and much deeper without getting into any of the overhead, without getting into any of the warehousing, without getting into having to worry about the shipping. All they're doing is providing an e-commerce front end, which a company like Hudson's Bay isn't that hard to do, and their budget isn't a huge budgetary expense. And they get the advantage to offer all these additional products to their customers. And in some cases, for example, Amazon has their fulfillment by Amazon service where for a fee, they will also handle inventory. They'll take care of the warehousing. They'll take care of the order management. I'm not actually sure if Hudson's Bay is offering those kind of back-end services or not, but they certainly could if they wanted to. But it still gives you the opportunity to offer this much both wider and deeper assortment of inventory with very low risk and very low overhead. And of course, for the seller, now you have access to this much larger group of potential customers. And now instead of just promoting your products to maybe even, a few thousand people, you're offering it to shoppers all across Canada.
Okay, so when we think of Hudson's Bay, this is like a super old company, right? Like it was founded in 1670. And I believe a couple hundred years later, they sold the land that they were using to Canada, right? So it's like they were literally intricately involved in the formation of Canada and its geography, right? But during the pandemic, we heard also that Amazon's business exploded. I mean, when I talk to my friends, they're all ordering from Amazon, when I want something from Hudson's Bay, I drive down a couple of kilometers away, or a mile and a half away, and there it is, big shopping center and everything. But when I'm looking for very specific things, I'd go to Amazon. So you mentioned specialty items. You mentioned in your article, you mentioned 500 different sellers. You also mentioned the lack of need to change their infrastructure. You said that they've got everything, including warehousing. They just need to move online with this new name, Marketplace. So again, do you see this as something that's going to be very successful? This challenge, this direct challenge to Amazon of all companies. What are your thoughts on that?
It is a big challenge, and I can't say at this point if it's going to succeed or not, but I would say it's a situation of, are you going to fight or are you going to give up? I mean, it's what it comes down to. Hudson's Bay, would have the option of essentially conceding the fact that Amazon is going to eat our lunch and we can't really compete. And then, of course, Walmart Canada has hundreds of stores, and they're probably getting squeezed on that end. And they could either just give up or accept the fact they're going to have a grassly downscale business, or try to find creative ways to fight back and try to get back some of that market share. And I think, to their credit, they're at least making an innovative effort to fight back. And where Amazon Marketplace is a huge success, and they really, in the last couple of years, have poured a lot of investment into it. They now offer, I think, over 150 specific educational and business resources just for their small third-party sellers. They're fighting fire with fire. If Amazon has been so successful with Marketplace, why not try their own marketplace? And I think, one, they're counting on their core customers to retain that loyalty and visit the Bay and start buying products off the Bay. And two, where they can get access to a lot of these maybe niche products, specialty products from sellers who are so small that it would just be too much of a risk to simply place them right onto the main website or right onto the store shelf. They can also try to entice shoppers with, here's some really cool stuff you won't see anywhere else, most likely including also on Amazon. And if there's enough of a demand, you could then take that product and maybe move it onto your main site, maybe do a pilot at 10 stores, and with certain key customer demographics, and see how it sells. And it's also really a very cost-effective way to perform product discovery. And they might also be thinking, obviously with Amazon, let's be honest, if you just need, new tube socks, you'll order them on Amazon. You're not going to really bother driving to Hudson's Bay or anyplace else. But if you're somebody who's looking for like really interesting nutritional supplements, and Hudson's Bay has this really cool little organic company that you might not have heard about otherwise. It has some really interesting supplements, and you want to check them out. They've just, made a new sale, or maybe landed a new customer. Maybe if that supplement is popular enough, they can add that to their, broader product inventory.
We've got a couple more minutes here, Dan, and I know you're the one used to actually being the interviewer, so I'll put you on the spot here a little bit, but what do you see as some of the challenges for this 350-year-old company? I mean, they've been around for 350 years for a reason, right? So as you were mentioning earlier, it's adaptation, it's evolution, and wow, online business over the pandemic just exploded. So what do you see as some of the challenges based on what you know about the Hudson's Bay company versus, for instance, Amazon or Walmart or eBay?
I think the number one challenge would be, I think, the same challenge that a U.S. retailer like Macy's or JCPenney faces, which is, let's say Amazon is everywhere. They have an amazing distribution infrastructure. The same is true of Walmart. I think eBay might be a little more specialized, where people are more likely to go to eBay if you're trying to buy collectibles or you're a real connoisseur, like if you're a sneakerhead. I don't know if eBay is quite as much of a destination for the person that, for example, needs to buy a new boxer shorts. But certainly Amazon and Walmart, they have the infrastructure, they have the low price. They have that really great basic product assortment where they carry all your basic daily household needs and, and life needs. So they're facing that same challenge. And I think with Hudson's Bay, to meet that challenge, I mean, nobody's going to beat Walmart and Amazon on price. You're not going to do it. You'll fail if you try. You're not going to beat them on we're a better place if you want to go and do rake because it's fall and I've got to rake the leaves. My old rake is worn out. You know, you're not going to beat them on things like that. But where you can potentially beat them is we have this really interesting, unique product assortment, you know, on the Bay, and particularly with the Bay, they can reach a lot of Canadian sellers that maybe can't really participate in the US market because they don't want to deal with customs, they don't want to deal with all the intricacies of shipping internationally, or depending on the product, maybe you have, you know, ingredients in your product that might not comply with US regulations. It's a lot easier for them to sell in Canada, and maybe Amazon has overlooked them. Hudson's Bay can pick up those brands, and that really becomes a differentiator in their value add.
Well, on that note, Dan, I'm going to have to let you go, but thank you so much. Dan Berthiaume, of Senior Editor of Technology for the Chain Storage Age retail publication. Thank you so much for joining us on this. I'm Dr. Sam Dubé for the Toronto Business Journal. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time, guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Dr. Sam Dubé here once again for the Toronto Business Journal, and today I'm joined with Jeffrey Dworkin. Jeffrey is the former head of news at CBC Radio and NPR Washington. Over the last 10 years, he's been running the journalism program at the University of Toronto, and he just finished authoring a textbook called Trusting the News in the Digital Age that has already been picked up by, I believe, 5 institutions. Is that correct, Jeffrey? And you're waiting for a Canadian institution to pick up the book as well?
I'm eager for them to do it.
Jeffrey, it's an honor, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We would love to speak with you about the controversial bill C-10. If you can give us a little bit of background, how it's supposed to be modifying and extending the Broadcasting Act into digital media, as well as something about the language of the bill and the ensuing controversy. Please.
C-10 is an attempt, as I understand it, to update the Broadcasting Act, which was written back in 1991, which is obviously in a pre-digital, pre-internet, pre-email era. And the focus of the broadcasting bill was to give a certain range of legitimacy and definition to basically the CBC. And what its mandate was in terms of its parliamentary permission to function as a national public broadcaster. The reforming or the updating of the Broadcasting Act has always been fraught. And the attempt by the Liberal government to do this is actually an interesting effort. The problem with the bill as is constituted is that it is too vague in some aspects and too specific in others. And I'll tell you what I see in that. The digital landscape right now is so different from what the media landscape was like back in 1991. We have streaming video, we have streaming audio, we have the collapse of the business model for all media, not just in broadcasting, but in print as well. So the landscape is so different, and for news organizations or media organizations to figure out a way that they can use this new landscape to the benefit of their public and their advertisers, and in many instances, their shareholders, is very difficult. One of the things that the bill has done is it has tried to figure out a way in which free information that is being used by the large media organizations like Google and Facebook and Amazon, they are always looking for free information that they can then use in some way to download, to share, to distribute, but they also don't want to pay for it. And a lot of media organizations in Canada and Australia and France and other countries have said that the free ride is over, that these large internet media companies need to pay for the content that they are taking advantage of.
Like in Australia with the news services, right?
Exactly. The Americans, certainly in the Trump administration, have said that if any country tries to do this, there will be serious economic consequences. With the new Biden administration, we're not sure where they're going to go with this. In the meantime, what we're seeing, in my experience, is that it is an economic issue, that a lot of media organizations in Canada specifically have found that they have lost their revenue streams, and that people are now going to Netflix and YouTube, etc., which are more or less free to the consumer. And news organizations want to have some tax on these large internet companies, that money will then go to support Canadian news and media organizations. That's the simple version. The more complicated version is that news organizations in Canada also take advantage of free content, and they turn it into their own content just by either rewriting it or just putting their stamp on it. So there's a financial difficulty and there needs to be more clarity. The government, either through the CRTC or through some other mechanism, needs to figure out a way to bring these large media giants and the Canadian media, smaller giants, to the table to figure out some method of sharing content and who pays. This is about royalties. And I remember when I was running news organizations and we would pick up a freelance report, or we would take a piece of reportage from the BBC or somewhere else, we would actually have to pay the BBC if we put that on the air at the CBC. That's not being done now in the same way. And I know that large media organizations on their websites are taking content from YouTube, writing a little bit around it, putting it up on their website, and then claiming it as their own, and they're not paying for any of it. So somehow these roosters, these chickens have to come home to roost. Sorry, to pay for this content is going to be the complication. Now, that's the sort of relatively straightforward challenge of the bill. The other complicating factor is culture. In English Canada, there is this sense that this is a free speech issue. Well, I don't think it is as much a free speech issue as it is a free content issue, and somebody needs to pay for it. But the whole idea that somehow there's going to be a regulatory body in Ottawa that's going to decide what is free speech and what is not is a big complication. In Quebec, there's much more support for the bill because the existence of French language media is even more stressed in Quebec than it is in English Canada. So the idea that French language media in Canada wants to find some way in which they can be supported by taxing these large international media companies is exactly the problem. So Quebecers see this as a cultural survival issue. English Canadians see it as a free speech issue. Those two polarities need to be brought together. And so far, the bill hasn't been able to do that.
Okay, that's very interesting, that cultural approach. I had not heard that before, but it seems really relevant here. But I'm just going to ask you one more question. There was some clause that was excluding the individual user, for instance, on social media, from the act, the bill. And yet that was removed to much controversy. So are individual users on social media, i.e. those who have influence, can they be seen as professional and thus under the influence of this new bill? Can they be constrained and thus contradicting the whole idea of free speech?
That's going to be the challenge. We need to kind of bring people together in a room and say, okay, you have 10 followers on your Facebook feed. I had a blog for a while. It was basically for my own mental health, not for anybody else's. I had a few followers, maybe a couple hundred. But I kept putting my ideas in a column on the internet. And would that have required me to be registered with a governing body like the CRTC?
Right.
Fortunately, that never occurred. But there are a lot of smaller bloggers that are growing rapidly. I can think of one in Toronto, which is a kind of a media critical blog called Canada Land, does some very interesting investigative journalism. It started off with one employee. It's now got, I think, 25. It started off with maybe 100 people who had signed on to it. It's got thousands now. Does Canada Land, which is kind of an outlier on free speech, does it need to be regulated? To what extent should people be forced to basically apply for a license to broadcast on the internet? That's the issue that's not resolved.
Okay, so
and
Jeffrey,
I think,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that until there is some clarity on what constitutes what is the point beyond which a person with a blog or a video performance, what is the point beyond which that person needs to find some kind of regulatory agreement so that they can continue to do their job? And that's the thing we don't know.
Okay, so I'm going to have to leave it there, Jeffrey. I want to thank you so much for your contribution. It does seem like the language of the bill leaves that open to a potential threat to individuals with large followings. It does seem that way.
I think so. And I think that if there is an election called, which seems more likely sometime over the next 6 months, and the bill is not passed into law, the bill will die and they'll have to start all over again. So we're all in this kind of never land of, is it going to happen and how is it going to happen for the next little while?
Jeffrey, I'm going to reserve you for a future interview so we can talk more about these issues and more. So thank you so much for your time. On behalf of myself, Sam Dubé, and the Toronto Business Journal, I wish you all the best, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeffrey.
My pleasure.
All right.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Sam Dubé here once again for the Toronto Business Journal, and joining me today is Robert Sysak. He is the Executive Director of West Queen West, which was voted by Vogue magazine as the second coolest neighborhood in the world, and actually the first coolest in the Western world because the winner was actually in Japan. And they are a world-renowned business improvement area centered in downtown Toronto. And we're here today to talk to Robert about government protocols and restrictions and its effect on small business. Robert, thanks so much for coming out here today.
You're welcome, Sam. Pleasure to meet you. It's one word I can say: devastating right away. It's been devastating. Businesses have been closed for a year. I've received phone calls of a member's daughter committed suicide because she didn't want to be a financial burden anymore. I've been there on the street when people have been evicted and they're holding their 3-year-old daughter and they're waiting for family from Montreal to come. It's just been crushing. So I don't want to talk long, but I do have to say we're the 3rd largest city in North America, and the point behind this being Mexico, New York, and us, and then Los Angeles, Chicago, is that our members deserve to know what's going on, why you're being closed. If there's a valid reason, then you close. But in the beginning of this, nail salons, I'll go straight from there. Even to open a nail salon, you have to follow so many guidelines. Health guidelines, you have to set everything up. It was probably the safest spot to be during the COVID, and they've been closed the longest. Barbershops, restaurants, and every day we meet Tuesdays with TABIA, which is the Toronto Association BIAs, and the City of Toronto. And we always ask, where's the data? The doctors are there. We go, show us the proof. Show me the numbers. And it's been about 3% were ever caused in small, medium businesses on the main street. So it's been crushing.
Absolutely. There's worldwide controversy regarding the effects of masking and social distancing and, of course, lockdowns. There was a Professor Allen at Simon Fraser University who looked at 80 different studies on lockdowns and found a 282-time difference in the number of lost years, or translated into lost lives, benefiting from the lockdowns versus not. In other words, the lockdowns have caused people to suffer 282 times less than if we didn't have the lockdowns in the first place.
Leadership has been lacking at every level. There's been no clarity, no strategy, no plan, and it's no consistency. Restaurants, outdoor, the evidence, if you want to follow science, all the evidence says do everything outside. Our restaurants prepared for patios in Toronto about a month ago. They bought their food, their liquor. You have to buy it about a week, 10 days in advance, spent lots of money when they haven't been open. And then the Friday before that Saturday opening, the province said, no, we're closing. You can't be open. So it's just devastating. So they had spent all that money. They did things. People had to fire people again. They had hired 20 staff. Those are things that no one thinks about. You hire staff, you buy the food. When it closes the next day, you're done. We're going to lose in West Queen West 30% of our businesses. I think some are still there while they're getting government assistance. But once someone says, I need your rent and I need to pay the taxes, they're gone. Some members are in debt to almost $100,000. You're not getting that back.
So what's the deal then with the businesses asking for data and proof to support these restrictions? And what is happening as a result of this request?
So as I mentioned, we have those TABIA meetings and we speak to City Hall and the mayor and the doctors. They're not supplying it. Like there's not once has it been supplied. We even officially wrote a letter by 5 BIAs signed on board to the province, to the city, to the municipalities, saying, give us the data. Because I might get members calling every day. You know, what's going on? Why are we closed? There's sad stories of the people. A daughter committed suicide because she thought she was a financial burden. I was there on the street when someone got evicted and they're holding their little 3-year-old daughter and their other son there, waiting for someone from Montreal to drive in 5 hours. So they're asking, why did this happen? And, you know, that's the part. They're not giving us that data.
Why? What do you think is going on?
Because I don't think the data's there to prove that you should close them. The data we had originally, and you know that we hear from some people now, about 3% ever came from the small businesses.
Right.
And they shut them all down. Businesses, especially on West Queen West or BIAs, there are places where you come in, there's 5 people shopping the max. They could limit it to 2. Like you kept a Costco open or a Walmart that were packed. But West Queen West and other businesses across the city, we had the data to show that, look, we have the wipe downs. We contract trace. We do everything, but they still shut it down. I don't think it was there. There are people now who would never have said this before, but they don't trust. They think there is a conspiracy of sorts from people I never would have imagined hearing that from. It's just unbelievable how quickly that changed.
And what do you think the origin of this conspiracy is? What do you think the root of it is?
Well, initially, I thought, it's the big businesses. They have lawyers and people, and they donate to the parties and the politicians and money. The one word is money. Whether it's the pharmacies, we're getting shots. Like, look at all the vaccines that have been purchased around the world. In Toronto, the rapid tests. Today, I received a call that West Queen West will be able to give rapid tests to our members if they want to have rapid tests. This is a lot of money being spent. So I think a lot of it has to do with money, and the businesses that didn't have money to advocate for themselves as well got shut down. But, if you're the politician, I'm the one who donated $100,000 to your cause, or, there's probably a better chance of me being open.
It's almost like they're living in the past, because there's an argument that the politicians are just in for a penny, in for a pound, and that they proclaim lockdowns very early on based on erroneous, misinformed modeling. right? Where the assumption was that you had to mandate these lockdowns instead of getting a voluntary response from the public when you educate them and you give them the options and you let them make an educated decision, like in Sweden, for instance, and in Taiwan, for instance. I mean, their proportional number of deaths in Taiwan is comparable to the U.S. having, I think, 129 deaths due to COVID. Like, that's the proportion based on population. So, certainly there's been some mistakes, but they just keep doing this. And you wonder, will the politicians actually rescind that and say, look, we made a mistake. The lockdowns just don't work. Here's, it's pretty clear worldwide. There's some data for this, but it's like they're just continuing along the same path. Nobody wants to take the blame, or no one wants to look forward and do what's right for the people.
That it's so true. On Friday, sadly, I lost a good friend.
I'm sorry.
COVID. He had a shot. I appreciate that. He had a shot. He wore a mask because he was vigilant about his wife. But his son and this gentleman's wife got COVID, the British strain, wearing masks from him, and they had shots as well. So even if there is the data to say certain things, you have to be cautious. But that's, again, coming back to what our small business would have done had they been allowed to be open. They should have done what they did in the Ontario schools. They didn't close a school unless there was a test. If somebody got it, then they would close that section of the school. Why not? Why didn't they do that for businesses? Okay, if your business has some, you're closed, but the other ones are still going, and you can open once you take care of it. Like, that's what the data was showing. But for some reason, and again, is it the money? Is it the fear? Is it the easy way out? Mm-hmm. I just think that they didn't have the leadership or the strength to lead.
Wow. So then what is your reaction to Ford and, when he tried to implement these, what were universally considered draconian measures, and then backtracking? What was the reaction then?
Well, my tatos from the Ukraine, my mother's from Lithuania, and it's always, let me see your papers. And that's what we were about to do. Ford was going to have our police forces say, show me your papers.
Yes.
Why are you here? Where do you live? Without any reason. Again, thank goodness, all the police forces, the vast majority said, no, we're not doing that. But in Wasaga Beach, there was one officer who went crazy on a family saying, this weekend, I'm going to be able to do what I want to get you out of here because we're having that power. So we have to be cautious of those kind of things. It was terrifying. Why aren't tennis courts open? You're so far apart.
Yeah.
All these kind of things. Golf should be open, but he can say you're meeting with 4. But tennis, you're on that other side of a net. Like, we have patios. My restaurants have been closed for over 300 days. They've had no income. There's nothing there. They get the rents, assistance and those kind of things. But you don't run a business just to pay the rent. You run it to make a little bit of a profit so you can feed your kids. You can buy clothes. You can put gas in the car. That's not coming from the assistants. They're just helping pay the rent. You have to have these places open. And like you said, that report, it's more damaging by 220 times.
Yeah, 282 times. That's right. Yeah.
As I said, there's suicides. I get phone calls every day of people crying, of my members crying. When the schools got closed, the lady had a restaurant, and I hate the word pivot now. She said we pivoted, and she started doing, catering. But all of a sudden, the kids were stuck at home. So she couldn't do the catering because there's no daycare for them. There's so many things that have been destroyed because of lockdowns, and the damage exactly as that is. I've seen it every single day. I've heard it every single day. The damage because of the lockdowns, I think, would have been so much more devastating than had you allowed the openings with, using cleaning and, monitoring and all that stuff. It's not even close.
No, and this is not the message that the politicians and the medical officers are mentioning. They're claiming that the ICUs are full. That's true. Yes, it's a deadly disease. There's no question about that. But you have the average 2.6 morbidities of the people that are dying from it. Elderly people being 1,000 times more likely to die. The risk to the young is less, even with the variants. And it just doesn't make sense, and yet they're not justifying, and they need to become more transparent on how they count cases. They need to be more transparent on how they count deaths.
I very much so, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, please.
Everything you just said about the ICUs, the numbers hitting 4,000, that all happened. Well, the restaurants and small business were closed. All those businesses were in lockdown when that happened. So it didn't come from that. There's data right there. We increased to those big numbers, not because of the restaurants or those businesses, because they were closed during that. ICU numbers went up during lockdown. So the data's there.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of them. They're not open. They couldn't contribute to it.
You know, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota stated that it wasn't COVID that crushed the economy. It was the restrictions and lockdowns.
Yeah, it's going to take, well, even surgeries, they just said 3.5 years and $1 billion for the Ontario government to cover those costs. My members, even the ones that survived, are now saying that they're like a brand new business. They're in debt beyond belief. They're going to have to make sure people know they exist still. It's like you're starting all over. And where do you get the staff? Are the people going to come back? I'm glad the summer's here. Open up. Let the patios be open. Let the nail salons that have so much, let people survive, because you are devastating. There's people, as I said, I saw him holding the baby. It makes me cry now, that little girl who did that. All these things. And that's just in West Queen West. It's all over the city of Toronto, all over the province, the Canada. How many devastating stories we're not hearing? It's crushing.
You know, Rob, you're known for being very popular and being very in tune with your constituency. People love you. I've seen you interacting in video, and you're a charismatic individual, and you really care, and that's your reputation. And I interviewed you last in October of 2020, late October, and even then your concern and compassion shone through. It is now mid-May 2021, and you just mentioned the summer's coming. Thank God we got to open up the patios. What do you see happening, and what are the indications? Because Ford just announced, or there's scuttlebutt that he's going to extend the current lockdown situation to at least June the 2nd. What are your comments to that, and what do you see happening in the future?
It's going to be until they say it officially. But as I mentioned, Tuesdays we have the meeting with the city and the Tabia.
Yes.
They've been told June 2nd. So hoping that that's not true, because in Toronto there's Cafe Teal, the patios on the curbside, taking away the parking. It's the only thing that's going to keep them alive, the businesses alive for a little while. Mm-hmm. And they're going to miss the long weekend. Mm-hmm. So, why if they didn't want the long weekend, and they're probably shooting themselves for setting that date. But right there's an example of how incompetent they are. They set the date of the long weekend for opening during COVID. They know, and their fear now is that if we open up, then people are going to come. It's a beautiful long weekend. They're going to come party in a fourth wave. That's what's in their mind. So why would you set that date again, have members and businesses prepare for that date, and then panic when the date comes?
Now,
the lack of leadership. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I had heard something about Ford saying that if he didn't impose new restrictions, that it would be political suicide. Is that true?
I heard that off. Yes, I heard him say that. And again, they're so afraid because of what they did that particular Friday when they, all those centers.
Oh man,
against the science.
Yeah,
like their science table and they did the exact opposite. So I think he means political suicide in the sense that if they don't listen to the doctors this time and something happens, it's over. I think it's over for most of them anyways. Again, I'm going to say I'm not a conservative, probably mostly liberal, but in the beginning, I thought he could be our prime minister when this started. I was impressed because you take a stand, you make a decision, and say this is why and this is what we're doing. Might not always be right, and then you clarify and clear. But he lost that. They became wishy-washy.
Yeah, and when he made the announcement, he had that. Part of me felt sorry for him. He had that kind of deer in a headlight. Yeah. Look when he was making this announcement, and then tearfully rescinding it a couple days later. That was crazy. But do you feel that the squashing of the small business is a side effect, or is this something that may be more planned? I know that's a loaded question, but
no,
I have to ask.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And a year ago, I would have laughed at you and saying, come on, that's a silly question. As I said before, there's people now who never in their lives would say, is something going on, something's wrong. And it's even crossed my mind. I mean, like why the patio should have stayed open. It's just all the science says, keep everything inside closed if that's what you want. Let all the businesses operate outside. That's what science says. So why aren't you allowing those patios to be open? Monitored, be safe, but outside it's like a 1% chance. Inside, it's incredible. So don't open inside until you think whatever the numbers. But they're shutting the outside. It's like every opportunity that a business has to make a little money, survive, and not be dependent. We're going to have a lot more people now who, in businesses who are my age, 55 and up, 56, they've done something all their life. They can't just refocus and pivot to some new business. They're fighting for their lives to keep it. And they're getting in more debt and more debt every month. The younger people, said, okay, I tried this, now I'll do something else and see what happens. But we're going to have so many people my age who are going to have to rely on the government for the rest of their lives. That's what I'm being told by these people. They're in debt so much. What other job are they going to do? And they're going to be waiting for a check from the government every month. Not that they don't want to work, but they've lost everything. People have invested. The lockdowns have cost people their livelihoods, their lives, their families, divorces, yelling. Those other horrible things.
Hey,
yeah.
I hear you, man. And the thing is this, the counter argument is that, well, look at the ICUs and look at, the deaths out there, but we need to be transparent on what constitutes a COVID death, because it was announced by the CDC in August of 2020 that only 6% of the accounted deaths claiming that it's COVID were due to COVID as the primary cause. And this statistic is not, we don't talk about this enough. We were not transparent enough. Myself, 6 people in my circle have passed over the pandemic. No, none of them had COVID.
Yeah.
None of them had COVID. One died because he couldn't get an organ transplant because it was not deemed to be, essential or an emergency. And when he got his consult, he lasted a few days after that and passed away at home. Very sad. And the rest didn't get the care that they needed. They were put in isolation.
My cancer surgery, got delayed a month and a bit.
That's right. 2 months. Yeah, you're very honest about your bladder cancer and heart failure.
So the stress on all those people, those are the things that they don't think about with the lockdown. Like that study the gentleman said, there's all these other factors that, and again, it affects business when someone can't pay a bill and they're, then they fight with their wife, they're divorced, they split the bill. We're going to lose. We've lost so much. They've lost so much. And I don't think we can wait till September to have things open. I do believe it's going to be June 2nd.
Okay.
They can't open up on the long weekend and say that they believe in science. It just would not, optically is going to be horrible. A long weekend, I would be at the patio. You'd probably be at a patio somewhere too. Everybody be there. It's sunny and warm. We'd be following the rules. They don't want that to happen, sadly.
I got a couple more questions for you here, Robert. And
sure.
one of them is with the talk of the variants and the debate about the effectiveness of the vaccines versus the variants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the change in policy regarding children and masking and vaccination of children, whereas months ago they were saying, children, they're not propagating it. There's actually many studies to prove this. And we're not hearing about that anymore. Now it's a change, vaccinate the children, et cetera, et cetera. How will the BIA that you're in charge of, how will your constituents react if they claim another wave, another variant? We got to keep these lockdowns going. Here in Ottawa, we were told by our chief medical officer that, the lockdowns will continue until we've got 75% of the population vaccinated. What? What?
Yeah, DeVille is saying the same thing. They're saying, our chief medical officer, I think people, okay, again, off the record, no one can go check. A lot of the businesses are doing things, are open. Not officially open, but you come to the back door, you come in, you're a friend, you're a client. Barbers are going to places. The nail salon people are probably still doing things. I mean, there's been a couple of big busts of parties lately, and they've all been in West Queen West.
Okay.
Yeah. So
you guys are the second coolest neighborhood in the world, right?
So if there's another lockdown, won't be plausible in the summer. I guess if I want to be honest, maybe they won't allow inside, and some members will close it, but you can't close anything that's outside, and you would have to allow tour thing. The members, no business in Toronto. I can tell you West Queen West, they would go crazy. They would be riots because we've had encampments in the park. Trinity Bellwoods is the most used park in Toronto, and it's right in the middle of West Queen West. There was 500 tents there because of the encampments, and there's still people there. That brought, not through any individuals, they have issues, everybody, but there was more violence, more crime, windows got shattered. All that costs money. Those people broke a big plate glass window. It's $500, $1,000 when you're not making income. People don't even want to hear the word COVID anymore. It's time to end. And again, you bring up the ICUs. our businesses were closed. Those numbers went up.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with the businesses there.
Yeah, and the 3% contribution from small business only. We've heard this. Certainly in Montreal, they're probably going to react the same way, being almost the same population and being known as quite a social, cosmopolitan, worldwide city, almost with a European character to it. Man, I could talk to you about this forever, but I do want to ask you another question here, Robert, and that is, you have a wonderful website, West Queen West. I've seen it. You've got videos detailing. Yes, it's heartbreaking. What's happening with people worldwide. But when you go to the website and you see what West Queen West was about and the businesses and the people and everything, it's like, wow, what have we lost? So I want to ask you, what role does social media play in maintaining these lockdowns? I just turned that question right around because things are being taken off, censored. Look at YouTube, look at Facebook, look at, these are tools that you use to promote.
Yeah, so we are an ABC of the City of Toronto Association Board and Committee. So we follow Chapter 19 of the Municipal Act, meaning that if the city says something, a BIA can never go against it. So when we're in lockdown and stay-at-home order, we have to be cautious on our Instagram and on all our social media for a couple reasons, and I'll explain quickly. We can't tell people to come to our neighborhood if there's a stay-at-home order. So it's very difficult for our social media team to do that. We'll say, hey, well, I'll do a video. Hey, if you're coming out for your essentials, come by here, that kind of thing. So right there, it puts a hamper and a damper on us doing that. But there are also neighborhoods, the Least Side BIA, they had their businesses join some Facebook group that were going to open illegally. This was a few months ago. The neighborhood, the community got so angry that they said they're never going to that neighborhood again. So there's a fine line. I can tell you this, and I'll be quick. I do a walk to my members, and I can go to one member, a bar. I always start with the mask, and I go in, and I'll go in one plot. They're hugging, they're ready to hug, share food and drinks. I can go right to the next business. They spray me down, and we stay away 80 feet. Even in our 2-kilometer stretch, there's probably 80 different types of reactions to this whole thing, the lockdown, COVID. It's not standard. It's not everybody believes this or everybody believes that. Everyone reacts differently. Almost every member I go into has a different reaction, about how you interact with people. So that's what we also have to understand. Because there's 300,000 people within a 15-minute walking radius of West Queen West. So we want them to feel comfortable, but there's also that point of COVID tiredness, as I was saying. So, we're COVID safe, but people are getting tired to hear even COVID safe, shop local. They know they got to shop local. We don't have to tell them anymore. They know there's a lockdown. It's good to remind, but people are, yes, I already know. Yes, I know COVID's bad. When things open, and here's the truth, this is what I really believe, because we have all those people living in that 15-minute walking radius, once this is over, for the businesses to survive, and the new ones that are coming, because there'll be new businesses always, it's going to be fantastic. If everything was open tomorrow, at least in West Queen West, every patio, every store would be packed. Even now, on a beautiful day like this, if you walk, the sidewalk's going to be packed. So I have a lot of confidence that people will come back. Like if it opened up right now, it'd be packed everywhere and people would be going crazy. So I don't think we have to worry about the apprehension of people or the fear of the people coming back, but we have to worry about the lockdowns.
Right.
Yeah. So
well, then let me ask you, the mental and emotional health of your constituents. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to two things. There's a Facebook group of all the BIA staff right across the 83 BIAs in Toronto. More than 10 of them, people like myself, have had to go speak to someone, to a doctor or somebody, because every day we're hearing 400 sad stories, whatever the number. So it gets to you. Like it's the sad things I mentioned earlier. It's not easy. You have your own worries and then you hear that. It's the mental damage, the mental health. We have CAMH in our area, so the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. They've given us a lot of literature that I've been able to share with members and numbers to contact. And they've been busy with that. I think that's going to be the biggest financial you can always get back, but the lost mental health and the bad things that happened, I think they're done. Marriages are over because, you had the financial burden of all that stress, those other horrible things. mental health has probably been, I think, the worst. You don't want to lose your business or money, but you can always figure something out, hopefully, fingers crossed. But when you lose mental health and you lose a marriage because of that, or you start taking drugs or booze or, you know.
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know what the stats are for adults, but Professor Bhattacharya, Stanford University professor of medicine, was quoted as saying that it's 1 in 4 for young people contemplating suicide.
Oh, yes.
That's a stat about 5 times what it normally is. Not that it's normal. And this is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And a report came out of France about children under the age of 12 wanting to run into traffic and die, because of lockdown. I
think what that means, as I mentioned earlier, that 11-year-old girl, what it did to the parents, to her brother and sister, to their family, to their neighborhood.
Well, that girl was 11 years old. She was 11 years old who committed suicide because she didn't want to be a burden. Oh my God.
Yeah, and obviously and I'm not blaming everything on that, but she must have had issues. But those parents' lives are ruined, obviously. But then their neighbors, and so you're not even just affecting the one thing. You're affecting everyone that they're in their circle of life.
Oh yeah, someone commits suicide, they've got issues. It's not just COVID. Someone dies, oh, it's all COVID. Like it dies of COVID because we can count the death. But if it's suicide, oh no, they had issues, and we you don't count those, right? Gee.
Yeah, no, and I think it's because the doctors, again, money for the bigger levels up. But I do think the doctors think they're doing right. But they get their paycheck. They live day to day. So when they're saying I never want to hear we're all in this together ever again, because they're not. They're not the ones traveling 3 buses to get to work to do something because they can't operate their regular business. They have to do something to survive. They're doing 3 buses because they can't drive there. They're not staying up till 12. They're not putting their kids through school. Like they have to quit working because they got to be online with their kids for school.
That's it.
When they're saying that we're in it together, I can't stand it because we're not.
Or even politicians, right? Even politicians, like a line like political suicide. Who cares? Do the right thing, damn it.
Exactly. That's leadership. It's honestly, if you explain, I think everyone, if I told you this is why we're doing, my best strength is I do not know a lot, and I'm okay with that. Meaning I make the final decision, but you explain to me why it should be that way. If it is, then we go that way. That's what the leadership means. You have to make the decisions and you go forward, but explain why. Be clear, be transparent.
This is the foundation of a free society, right, Rob?
Yes.
Where people are educated and informed in theory, and then they're given that room to make that decision, right? I mean, this is the basis of having volition and free will. And it seems to me like there's assumptions being made that things have to be mandated, otherwise, And so where did that go? Free speech is out the window. And then
sorry, go ahead.
No, and the restrictions. Go ahead.
They're treating business, us as children. Like it's okay, yeah, you're doing well. That's a good way to do it, but this is the better way. And when you treat people like that for so long, you're going to lose control. So I think they're messing up because they're not going to be able to have more lockdowns. They're not going to be able. No one's going to believe them anymore on a whole bunch of things. Would you believe Ford when he says something, or like, I'm following the science? No, you weren't. You lied. Like the transparency, show us what's going on.
Exactly.
Things, transparency, clarity, and a plan. For businesses, I can tell you what I have 6 calls already this morning saying, so are we opening? We need to know. Okay, then give us. It's going to be 500, 200 in ICU, whatever they believe. They have to give, not just the date anymore, because that can change. Tell us that it's this number and that number, and when we're there, you're open. Like whatever it is, 75%. I don't even necessarily agree with those things, but if there's something, business needs to plan. They can't go by the seat of their pants going,
right.
Okay, like, do I hire people for next week for the patio? I have a big patio. I would need 10 people. Do I hire them now? Or do I wait 2 weeks? Or do those people want to come to me if I hire them and let them go again? There's other, like it's.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating not knowing the real statistics and being told at the last minute, June 2nd or maybe some other date,
That's the thing.
You can't
I'm hoping that's the lesson. Yeah, hoping that, sorry to interrupt again, I'm hoping that's the lesson we learned, that transparency matters. Show the data, whether it proves your point or not. That's like my degrees in math and my master's in cosmology I'm trying to get. It's just, I'm not right or wrong. Here's the data. What's it show?
Yeah, I agree completely. You know, I have a background in math too, and I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I feel the same way. That's why you and I both feel very strongly, because it doesn't reflect the reality. The data is not forthcoming, and it's very selective in what they're hinging decisions on, and some of it's very, very old and proven to be misguided, misled, faulty models. I mean, the old models about COVID propagation out in the UK from Imperial, they're completely wrong, mathematically completely wrong. And the general public needs to understand just a mildly wrong assumption at the beginning of a model. We know by nonlinear dynamics, exactly, by nonlinear dynamics, exponential change in outcome, the butterfly effect, you know, call it whatever that, you know, whatever you need to call it. But you know as well as I, you and I feel that intuitively because of our backgrounds. Yeah. And it's so painful. So many. And I've got you here. I got to ask you another question. Okay. Like in the US, at least they've got red and blue, right? So Republican versus Democrat, and the policies and the beliefs are wildly divergent. But here in Canada, there's this kind of strange unanimity when it comes to, you know, the lockdowns and the voting. You've got the Liberals versus the Conservatives. You've got the NPDP. And you know, it's like, who is voicing opposition? You know what I mean, to some of these ideas, and we're not hearing it the way that you hear, you know, Governor Noam saying something, and the DeSantis saying something, and then I'm not going to start naming more names. But so, what do you think what's going on there?
I think it's a Canadian attribute in a sense that when times do get difficult, we are there for each other. We're not in it all together that we're having the same experience. But if there's a certain path that people believe is right, and to get us out of the thing, I think governments, and they're starting to change that a little now. The Conservatives are kind of harping more on the feds, and you know they're doing it. But in the beginning, it's kind of like war footing. And I think Canadians, my father's from the Ukraine, came here. You know, there's Russians here, and there's people here. The wars, you know, people forget not what happened. They don't forget, but they don't carry it here. Most of them. My dad has lunch with the Russian people. There's Italians with, you know, everybody's mixed here, especially Toronto. 51% of Torontonians were not born in Canada. Right. So you have from everywhere. So we kind of have that. I think Canadians work together. I take it as a positive attribute most of the time, but this time I think it did cause us a little because Alberta's having a lot of those protests. There's the priest. We had our own little burger place in Toronto. Do the things. I just think that they made errors in the sense that when they did the protest, it became about everything. There would be 100 different people there protesting. I think for the people wanting to protest, should have been more focused, and they should have the right to voice their opinions as well, but should be more focused and direct, and they should have data because and you can't just say, I got it from the doctor on YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes that's kind of why you lose your credibility. Not you, as I'm saying, but the individual there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because they're quoting things, and then, you know, they haven't researched who that individual is. Mm-hmm. So, but I think it's an attribute for Canada that we stuck and work together. I think that's a positive. I do think that'll change quickly. Once things are back, there'll be, you know, electioneering and people and the Conservatives will become a little more right. The Liberals will be a little more left, and the NDP really left. So I think all that is going to come back. It's even happening in now the businesses, as some businesses were complaining about the CERB saying no one wants to work, you know, because you're getting $2,000.
Yeah.
And I'm about to say something that'll get me in trouble with my BIA. You're not a job supplier if someone can't live, you know, if $2,000 clearing a month is they make more there than working at your job. Like, you're not giving job support. You're just taking advantage of people of poor. I really believe that. That's what we need to know now. I do believe there should be a guaranteed income because I think it's end of vacation days because it's $26,000 to be in a hospital for COVID. That's the cost. Or it could have been $150 to keep someone at home. Wouldn't have cured that all. I'm not saying it, but those things that we think, not everyone's going to abuse them. Some people might. But you got to have these things. We just realized this. If we had that guaranteed income and some other things, we wouldn't need to serve. We wouldn't need to spend billions. We could have focused more on businesses. It's just, if you have the infrastructure there, it's good for the next time.
Oh, I hear you, Rob. So listen, Rob, I think we're going to sign off here. You have anything else you want to add? You're good?
Yeah, when you're in Toronto, you got to come to West Queen West. You can just Google me. You'll see a lot of cool stuff. Hard to believe I'm still single, but
shameless plug. Oh, dear, exactly,
yes.
So that's Robert Sysak, Sysak. And what's your website for West Queen West?
westqueenwest.ca.
Awesome.
Awesome.
So this is Dr. Sam Dubé for the Toronto Business Journal on behalf of myself and Robert Sysak, the Executive Director of West Queen West, and the second coolest neighborhood in the world. I want to thank you for watching.
Number one now.
Number one. You won't get any argument from me. So, Robert, once again, thank you so much. And, we're hoping and praying and be safe. Okay? All right?
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you.